Hello carnivores. Today we're going to learn about applying the distributive property. We're first going to talk about the vocabulary that we need, which is to identify what terms, like terms, constants, and coefficients of an expression are. Then we're going to review how to combine like terms. We're going to review how to apply the distributive property with both positive and negative numbers. And then we're going to use the distributive property to simplify an expression. So a term is a part of an expression that's separated by addition or subtraction. And so in this case, this example would have three terms, and they would be 3x, 7y, and 5. And it's important to pay attention to the sign of a term. In this case, none of these have a negative sign in front, so they're all positive, but if there was a minus sign here, we'd have to know that that term was negative. The coefficient is going to be the number that's multiplying the variable. So the coefficient in the term 3x is just the 3. The whole term is the 3x, but the number that's doing the multiplying is just 3, so that's our coefficient. Constants are going to be the numbers that remain the same, which means they cannot have a variable. And if you think about that, a variable can vary or change, right, by definition, and constant means stay the same. So you can't vary and stay the same at the same time, so a constant cannot have a variable. And so the constant in this expression would be 5. It's the only term that wouldn't change because it doesn't have a variable. And then the last thing is like terms, which are terms that have the exact same variable piece. So an example of like terms might be like 3x and 4x, or negative 7y and 5y. The variable has to match exactly. So what you're going to do is on these three examples, you're going to decide if they are like terms, and for each answer you're just going to say either yes or no. And you'll say yes if the variable matches exactly, or no if they don't. So pause the video, say yes or no for each, and then press play when you're ready to check your answers. So our first example would be yes, because they both have x. Our second example would be no, because one has y and the other one has y squared. And the third example would also be no, because one has a and the other one has ab. So it's important to recognize like terms, because once you have a set of like terms, you're allowed to combine them, which means you're allowed to either add or subtract them. And so the way that we do that is we either add or subtract the coefficients, depending on whether or not you're adding or subtracting, and then you keep the variable the same. So just for a quick example, let's say you had 7y plus 10y. This person has 7 of some object y. I think of it sometimes as paper clips, like 7 paper clips plus 10 paper clips. You'd end up with 17 paper clips. So you have the same item, we still have y, it's just that we have more or sometimes less of that item. So at this point you're going to move on to the next page. So in this first section we're actually just going to combine our like terms, and if you look at each set, they are like terms because they have the same variable piece, or in this one we're going to have to make that determination. But pretty much all you're going to do is if it's adding, you're going to add. If it's subtracting, you're going to subtract the coefficients, or the numbers in front. So in this case we're going to do 5 plus 3 to get 8, and then we're going to keep our variables the same. In this one we're subtracting 7y minus 3y, so 7 minus 3 is 4, and we're going to keep our variable the same. So at this point you're going to pause the video, and you're going to combine each set of like terms that you see. The key to pay attention to is if something has a minus sign in front of it, it's technically a negative term. And so one helpful thing that you could do, I didn't do it on this one, but I could have done it, is you could do keep, change, opposite, and that will help you kind of keep your signs in order. Pause the video, press play when you're ready to check your answers. So we have 7x squared here, negative 10 plus 7. Remember, we're going to keep the sign of the bigger number, which is negative, and subtract. That's where we get negative 3 from. In this case, when we combine our y's, remember that it's a negative 5 plus a positive 2. And a negative 5 plus a positive 2 is going to be negative 3. And in this last example, when we're combining our z's, you're technically combining a 2 plus 1, which is where that 3 comes from. So now we're going to apply the distributive property, which means that to apply a distributive property, we're going to multiply everything on the inside by the expression on the outside. So this should be just a quick review. So in this case, we're going to multiply 2 to both of these items. And I like to draw the rainbows. I think it helps as like a tactile reminder, like you're actually physically doing it. It will help you to not forget to do the multiplication. And so in this case, our final answer would be 2x plus 8, because 2 times x is 2x, and then 2 times 4 is 8. If I jump down just really quickly, I'm going to jump to this example for a second. First, before I start, because I'm distributing a negative and because there's a negative inside, I know that it has the potential to be a tricky problem. So I'm actually going to do keep change opposite in the middle. So I'm going to rewrite 4x minus 2 as 4x plus negative 2. And now I'm going to distribute my negative 5. And so then I just kind of follow my rules of multiplication. Negative 5 times 4x is going to be negative 20x, because a negative times a positive is a negative. Then I'm going to bring down my plus sign because I made this plus. But then I'm doing a negative times a negative, which is going to be a positive 10. So that's kind of important to keep in the back of your mind. All right, so at this point, there are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 more examples. I'd like you to pause the video, press play when you're ready to check your answers. Okay, so over here we have negative 3x plus negative 15, 8x plus 28, 5x plus 10. So we're still distributing 5 even though it's on the wrong side, or a different side. In this example, we're really distributing a negative 1, so you can see I've drawn it in there in red. So, and I've also done keep change opposite. So it would be negative 1x plus positive 3. And then here I have x squared plus 2x, and then 6x plus x squared. So here's some more complicated examples. I'm going to do a few of these first and then have you do some on your own. So on the first example, we're going to start by distributing through our 3. And if you kind of think about this, so we're still following PEMDAS. It's just that what's in parentheses, if I start there, it says to do 2 plus x. Well, I can't add a 2 and an x, so I have to move on. There's no exponents. So I'm going to move on to multiplying or dividing. And so there is multiplication. It just comes in the form of distributive property. So I'm going to distribute through my 3, and I'm going to get 6 plus 3x. And then I just drop down my 5x. And now I have a set of like terms that I can combine, which is going to get me 8x. And I can drop down my 6. So my final answer is 6 plus 8x. And I'm not allowed to combine those because they're not like terms. If I go to the next example, and I'm still following PEMDAS, so again, I'd start in parentheses, and I have 3 plus 2x. Not like terms, I cannot add them. I don't have any exponents, so now I'm going to move on to multiplication. So it's important to recognize that multiplication is happening here, where the 8 is connected to the parentheses, not here. So I don't want to add these, I want to start by multiplying. So I'm going to distribute through my 8, which means I'm just going to drop down my 4, and then I'm going to have plus 24 plus 16x. And now I'm going to combine my like terms, which are 4 and 24. And so I end up with 28 plus 16x. So I'm going to do one more of these together, which is this bottom example here. And so we can start this example by distributing the 4, which seems pretty commonplace. So I'd end up with 4n plus 36. The key is now the second number that's being distributed isn't just a 3. It's actually a negative 3. And if you rewrite it as keep change opposite, you can really see that. So now I'm going to bring down a plus sign because that's what's written there. And then I'm going to distribute through with a negative 3. So if I distribute a negative 3, I'm going to end up with negative 6 plus negative 3n. And then I can combine like terms. So 4n plus negative 3n, I could write as 1n. And 36 plus negative 6 would be 30. Now remember that you could also write 1n as just n with no 1 in front. If you did not make this change, there's a chance that you got this correct. You probably have it as 36 minus 6, which is the same, but you probably have this as positive. So it's important to make the change here so that way you really know you're distributing through by a negative. So there's 3 examples left here. I'd like you to give these 3 a try, and then when you're ready, you're going to pause the video, and when you're ready, you're going to press play and come back and check your answers. So in this top example, we can see that we're distributing first by a -4. I did keep change opposite here, which negative times negative is where that positive came from. Then we did 6 times 2, but that was -12, and so I did keep change opposite there as well. And that helps me when I go to combine -12, and a reminder that I'm combining with a -12, which is where I get my -4 from. On this one, we're distributing everything through that's positive. It's just that it was 4x minus 12, and again, I did keep change opposite. And so then 16 plus -12 is where that 4 came from. And then on this last example, it's important to make the change to know that you're distributing through a -2. So we have 8x plus 24 plus -16 plus -2x. And then 8x plus -2x is 6x, and 24 plus -16 is +8. Okay, so this is going to be the type of problem where I'm going to show you kind of like the math reason behind it, and then a potential shortcut. So if I wanted to rewrite the following as a distributive property problem, it would look like this. 36x minus 24, and then I could write it as divided by 6. But then if you think about like fractions, which I know seems odd because there's not any fractions here, right? But imagine this was a fraction. If we went to divide, I can't remember, just write this up here for a second, like 1/2 divided by 2/3. We know that to divide fractions, you change it to multiplying and then you reciprocate. So if I did that here, what that would mean is 36x minus 24 times the reciprocal, which is 1/6, because it's really 6 over 1. Now it's like I'm distributing 1/6. And if I did that, 1/6 times 36x would be 6x, minus 1/6 times 24 would be 4. So if I'm trying to get here without doing all that, we can just kind of recognize that it was simpler to say, well, wait, 36 divided by 6 is 6, and 24 divided by 6 is 4. So what I've essentially done is I've divided both of these by 6. So what I can do is, I call it the beans. I can set up my first bean, which is 36 divided by 6, and then my second bean. What we're going to have to pay close attention to is signs and things like that. So unlike at this example, I'm going to do 40x divided by 8. So 40 divided by 8 is 5, but then there's an x involved. And then I'm also going to do 32 divided by 8, which is 4. That's my answer. It's important just to remember that the thing that's separating these two numbers is division, not multiplication. A lot of people do that for some reason. So I'm going to have you try these 3 examples and pause the video to do that. Press play when you're ready to check your answers. So one thing to pay close attention to on these examples is the signs. So in this case, we're dividing 4x by -2, which is -2x. On this example, I changed it from -8 to plus negative. So plus, but then a negative divided by negative is positive. Same thing over here. -6 divided by 3 is -2y. And then it's plus, and it's 2 positives, which would be +6. And then -10 divided by -5 is 2z. And again, I did keep change opposite. So this plus is this plus, and then -20 divided by -5 is +4.